Hey everyone, Pastor George here with today's Bible study recap. Today in Bible study, we looked at Romans 13, a very challenging, I think, part of Romans, especially for many of us, because it involves the government and how we relate to it. But then also, what is at the heart of every Christian relationship and desire. So, Romans 13 begins with Paul talking about the role of government and governmental authorities. Um, Now, for most of Romans, Paul has been talking about justification by faith to his hearers, to the people who are going to be reading the letter, and then he shifts towards the end in kind of moving into places like, okay, where does this affect your life? And one of the places Paul places this effectiveness is in our relation to the government. One of the things that is really consistent in Jesus's teachings and in the teachings of the apostles is that, and in the Old Testament, is that government has been instituted by God for the purposes of fulfilling justice. And so Paul says that the role of Christians isn't to resist government. And automatically, I think in the modern world, especially in the modern West, especially I would think in the United States, that is a really difficult thing to hear. After all, right, we're in our 250th year. We're celebrating across the country 250 years ago when people resisted against a government, right? Now, what Paul says to this, and what's clear in the actions of the followers of God in both the Old and New Testaments, is that the Christians are not to be overly, I would say, concerned with the governments of this world in the sense of desiring power, fighting against them, because Paul rightly understands, and I think we see this around us, that political ideology ends up consuming the people that are interested in those things, right? This is not something that was unheard of at the time. I mean, in Judea, there were people whose whole religion was wrapped up in resisting the Roman government. So Paul knows that this is not an uncommon thing for people, maybe especially Jewish believers, to feel about the governmental authorities at the time. But as Jesus makes clear with things like he says with pay your taxes and his lack of commentary about some of the things that Pilate did, and the way that Paul and Peter and others talk about this, is that the role of government is to exercise authority, to be a servant of God in punishing evil. That's when government is at its best. Now, when the government goes against what God says and is attacking you, you just continue to do what you do, and if you get arrested, then you get arrested for those things, right? And Paul will be arrested. Jesus is arrested. Other believers are arrested by Roman authorities, but that doesn't mean that the whole point of the faith is to go against governmental authorities, which can be very challenging, especially if we wrap up a lot of our faith into our politics, which is the dangerous thing to do, right? So it serves as a warning for that. But the second part of Romans 13, the less focused on part, I think, is also important, because what Paul does here is he appropriately wraps it up with um, loving our neighbors as ourselves, and that being the heart of the Christian walk in this life. And we're actually going to see some about this on my sermon on Sunday as well, because this is a big thing to Paul, right? Yes, you are saved by faith, but that doesn't mean that you just do whatever you want. How you respond in faith matters. And so Paul is going to show how all of these commandments, yes, they've been violated, but at the heart of the law is loving your neighbor as yourself. And Paul says that Christians are in no better time and place to do this, because the day of the Lord gets ever closer. And so we have every reason to be bold, every reason to love boldly, and to talk about who Jesus is, and to follow the commands of God, because now is the time, right? There's no better day than today to start. So that's what Paul tells his people. And I mean, is going to be very important for the rest of our readings through Paul's letters, where he's going to be dealing with a lot of personal issues in churches, and seeing how, even not in those letters, but even in our own churches, how we can get around these things by properly ordering ourselves around the love shown to us in Christ and that Paul talks about in the book of Romans. So that's what we talked about today. I hope you found that interesting. I will see you all on Sunday for our worship service. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. Peace out.